Welcome back to Cinematic Century Chronicle, where I reflect on at least one film from every year between 1920 and 2020. Today's film is one of the strangest, most daring, and most controversial silent movies ever made, Häxan, released in 1922. It's part documentary, part horror, part fantasy, and part social critique, a film that feels both medieval and modern, sometimes in the very same sequence. Just a quick note, this video contains spoilers. Häxan is an experience worth seeing for yourself, so if you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it. Häxan opens in a way no one would expect from a horror film. Instead of witches, demons, or trials, we're greeted with a lecture. Benjamin Christensen, who wrote, directed, and starred in the film, begins with illustrations and artifacts, medieval woodcuts, astronomical diagrams, and models of the cosmos, the kinds of images you might expect in a history classroom or a museum exhibit. Then the film takes a turn. Suddenly, we're no longer looking at static images. We're watching witches at work. Women brew potions. A seductress tries to tempt a monk, and demons intrude into everyday life. In one striking moment, coins magically leap across the table through stop-motion animation, a devil's trick to lure humans into sin. From there, the film expands further, eventually moving into larger sequences of trials, inquisitors, and torture. What begins as a historical lecture morphs into reenactment, and then into nightmare visions of demons, witchcraft, and persecution. One of Häxan's greatest strengths is its imagery. Christensen and cinematographer Johan Ankerstjerne didn't just film actors, they created visions that could feel like paintings, nightmares, or both. Some of my favorite shots are still stunning today. The shadowy faces lit like a Rembrandt painting, the surreal flying witches drifting across the sky, or the grotesque yet oddly playful images of demons and ghouls crowding around the cauldron. The film also used cutting-edge special effects for its time. Double exposures allowed ghosts and demons to appear on screen alongside living actors. Puppetry and practical effects created devils with wagging tongues and witches stirring bubbling cauldrons. For new audiences, this was shocking, bizarre, and unlike anything they had seen before. The combination of artistry and special effects placed Häxan on the frontier of what silent film technology could achieve. Benjamin Christensen wasn't just the director of Häxan, he also played the devil himself, appearing in grotesque makeup, wagging his tongue and leering at the audience. He threw himself into the role with theatrical gusto, making Satan both terrifying and oddly comical. Christensen was already known in Denmark for experimenting with unconventional film styles, but Häxan was his most ambitious project. He spent 2 years researching medieval witch trials, poring over manuscripts and church records. This research shows up in the obsessive detail of the film, the costumes, the rituals, the torture devices. Häxan's production was extraordinarily costly. It's documented to have cost between 1.5 and 2 million Swedish kroner, making it the most expensive Scandinavian silent film of its era. Häxan's ambition catapulted Christensen to international fame. He even ended up in Hollywood later in the decade, directing films for MGM such as The Devil's Circus 1926 and Mockery 1927 with Lon Chaney. While none matched Häxan's daring, his Hollywood years proved just how far this strange film had carried him. Christensen wasn't the only one giving a strong performance. The women accused of witchcraft bring a tragic realism to their roles, their anguish under torture, their confusion as they're tricked into confession. It all feels painfully authentic. In many ways, their performances ground the film's surreal horror in something heartbreakingly human. The grotesque devils might shock us, but it's the women's suffering that lingers long after the film ends. Häxan stirred immediate controversy. In multiple countries, including Germany, France, and the United States, censors took issue with its graphic imagery of torture, nudity, and anti-clerical elements, forcing substantial cuts or outright bans. In Sweden, at least one notorious moment, a witch rips the finger from a corpse to brew a potion, was excised before audiences could see it. In North America, large parts of the film were trimmed down, with anything that smacked of blasphemy or sexual perversion removed for fear of offending public morality. These interventions shaped not only what audiences saw, but also how the film was remembered. The censorship and bans surrounding Häxan added to its mystique. Though intended as a blend of scholarship and spectacle, many authorities treated it as dangerous or obscene. As parts were cut or screenings blocked entirely, the film's reputation grew beyond its actual box office reach. By the 1960s revival, it was already being rediscovered as a taboo artifact of silent cinema, admired by critics, artists, and cinephiles drawn to its boldness and transgressive aura. For many years, Häxan was hard to find. In 1968, it was re-edited and released in the US as Witchcraft Through the Ages, which added jazz music and narration by William S. Burroughs. That version helped the film re-enter circulation and reach new audiences. One of Häxan's most striking sections is its portrayal of witch trials in the Middle Ages. Christensen shows how inquisitors coerced confessions through intimidation, trickery, and outright torture. Women accused of witchcraft are cornered into describing impossible crimes, not because they are guilty, but because their accusers demand proof of their own superstitions. Title cards cut sharply. The witch madness, like a spiritual plague, ravages wherever these judges go, and Christensen drives that point home visually. We see women breaking under interrogation, confessing to pacts with the devil or to bizarre acts they could never have committed. Judges loom over them in shadow, embodying the machinery of authority that weaponizes belief. At the same time, the film slips into grotesque fantasy. Devils crowd around cauldrons, leering and goading the women forward. In one particularly eerie moment, the camera reveals a horse-shaped skeleton lumbering across the screen, a surreal vision that feels like something out of a nightmare rather than a courtroom. By blending these nightmarish images with stark depictions of coercion, Christensen makes the witch hunts feel both historically grounded and eerily surreal. The power of this section lies in the contrast. Häxan doesn't just illustrate witches flying on broomsticks or cavorting with demons. It exposes the system of persecution that created them. The true horror isn't supernatural. It's the cruelty of authority cloaked in piety. Christensen wasn't just a showman. He knew how to structure his story. Häxan begins with history, shifts into medieval horror, and then lands in the present day, and each section connects to the others. The film's central argument is clear. What we once called witchcraft is often just misunderstood human behavior. Women accused of being witches were often midwives, herbalists, or simply outsiders. In modern times, Christensen suggests, these same women would be diagnosed with hysteria or other medical conditions. One of the most striking title cards comes at the end. Poor little hysterical witch. In the Middle Ages you were in conflict with the church. Now it is with the law. That connection between past and present is what makes Häxan resonate a century later. Part of what makes Häxan timeless is how it uses history to reflect on the present. Christensen wasn't only fascinated by witches, he was fascinated by the psychology of belief and by how fear and misunderstanding can shape entire systems of authority. His extensive research into medieval witchcraft records gave the film its texture, but he wasn't content to leave it in the past. He shows how the same fears that drove witch hunts persisted into his own time. In the Middle Ages, women could be branded as witches for being midwives, for mixing herbs, or even for simply living alone. In 1922, society had new labels, but similar outcomes. Women could be institutionalized for hysteria, declared unstable for behavior that today we might understand as symptoms of trauma, depression, or other treatable conditions. By placing these eras side by side, Christensen underscores that persecution adapts, but it never disappears. The continuity is chilling. Whether through the burning stake or the locked asylum, societies always find ways to marginalize people they don't understand. This is what elevates Häxan beyond curiosity or spectacle. It isn't just a film about witches, it's about the enduring tendency of authority to punish difference and about how superstition, whether religious or medical, can become a tool of control. Häxan isn't just a silent oddity, it's a film that blended documentary and horror, spectacle and critique, history and modernity. 100 years later, it's still unlike anything else in cinema. It matters not only because of its shocking images, but because of its ideas. Christensen used witches and demons to ask bigger questions about authority, belief, and the treatment of women. He dared to connect the superstitions of the past with the institutions of his present, and in many ways, with ours today. And thanks to its rediscovery in the 1960s, Häxan continues to cast its spell, whether you see it as horror, history, or a surreal mix of both. Next time on Cinematic Century Chronicle, we'll head to Hollywood for Harold Lloyd's Safety Last, one of the greatest comedies of the silent era, and a film that pushed physical comedy to new heights. Subscribe and join me as we continue to chronicle the course of 100 years of film. Until next time, have a great rest of your day.